Yep, sit back, relax, and get ready to enjoy another awesome video by Capt Frank Lanier. Please subscribe, like, and share with all your friends and all the people you hate too. So for today's find, we're looking at a sight gauge for a diesel fuel tank on a large trawler. You have valves at the top and the bottom, which is good. These valves allow you to shut off the fuel when you're not actively checking the fuel level. You should also have a sign that says, in effect, to only open these valves when you're actively checking the fuel level, and then shut them and close them after each use.
So today's find, the fire extinguishers that couldn't. So these are fire extinguishers on board a 2019 vessel. They are still in the box. They've never been mounted. And in fact, I can see a little bit of powdery residue. Let's see what we got here. Actually, this one here, the pin is missing, so it has been partially discharged. So do yourself a favor. Imagine, one, if you had to get to these fire extinguishers in an emergency, you certainly won't want to have to root around in here to try to find them. You'd want to have them mounted and easily accessible. And of course, the partially discharged unit should be replaced immediately. So for today's find, we have a light fixture that is broken from its mount, and it is just swinging free, and it's free to bang against this. This is actually a fuel filter for a generator. So this thing's just going to bang around here. Who knows what will happen? Will it crack the bowl? Will it unseat something, jar hose loose, whatever? Anyway, so this light, of course, needs to be properly mounted so that it's not banging against the fuel filter. Okay, for today's find, we have a newly installed engine, very nice. And when they did the install, this is the vented loop for the exhaust system, or actually the vented loop right here. It's that fitting right here. So instead of going the extra step and mounting that at the bulkhead, they just wire tied it to the exhaust hose for the engine. This, of course, promotes chafe, and it's just an unprofessional looking job. So let's have them mount that onto the bulkhead rather than just wire tie it to the exhaust system for a water lift muffler for the engine. For today's find, we have the raw water intake for a toilet, the flush water, and at some point they pulled the hose off the through hull and they forgot to reinstall the hose clamps. They probably did this for winterizing the toilet, and they forgot to reinstall the hose clamps. So the hose clamps, of course, need to be reinstalled. For today's find, we have a hatch aboard a mid-sized powerboat, and you can see that the latching mechanism is broken and missing. And in fact, you can see there the remnants of duct tape, which is what they use to keep the hatch closed and water out while the vessel's underway. So, of course, the recommendation here is to replace the latching mechanism.
I remember getting in a truck, I had no idea where I was at.
Somebody's house.
Yeah. They had two condos side by side. So you're not sleep on the boat tonight, just come sleep here. I woke up, I was like, oh, king bed. I was like,
There's a good story.
For today's find, life jackets. Life jackets are often stored in these zippered containers, which keeps them organized and keeps them clean. The problem is these life jackets are still inside the original shipping bags. These bags need to be removed because if the Coast Guard stops you, they are not considered to be readily accessible if they're inside the original shipping bags. So the bags need to be removed from these life jackets prior to storing them in the zippered container. So for today's find, we're checking a generator during a survey, and we've noticed that we open up the reservoir for the antifreeze or coolant. It is empty. There is no coolant in here. The owner said, well, let's just go ahead and add some and go on with the survey. But the problem is as coolant doesn't evaporate, this means most likely there is a leak in the system that needs to be found and corrected before just proceeding. So here's an interesting little tidbit. All vessels 39.4 feet or greater in length are required to carry on board and maintain a printed copy of the Navigation Rules and Regulations Handbook. Note that I said a printed copy, a hard copy. It can't be a digital version on your iPad or phone or whatever. It has to be a printed copy. So for today's find, we have a problem with this stern thruster. If you look at it closely, you'll see one of the blades is missing. These props are plastic, so the prop just needs to be pulled off and a new one installed. Looking at the bow thruster, we see that the sacrificial anode is loose here. It's not doing anything when it's loose like this, so it needs to be tightened so that it can provide cathartic protection for the bow thruster. So for today's find, we've spotted some blisters on the hull of this mid-sized trawler. The best time to spot blisters, as you can see here, is right after the boat's been hauled and power washed and while the hull is still wet. Position yourself so that the sunlight reflected underneath the hull is at the strongest angle, and then just walk down the hull and the blisters will stand out very visually. So for today's find, we're looking at the exhaust system for a generator. We're going to look at the vented loop hoses here for the exhaust, and you can see that they are badly deteriorated. That's what all the cracking and stuff is. A quick look at the exhaust hose to the water lift muffler, and you can tell that it's also cracking and deteriorated as well. It's even worse down here towards the muffler where the elbow, where the turn is here. You can see right here. So both of these hoses, the vented loop hoses and the exhaust system hose for the water lift muffler, are in need of immediate replacement.
So for today's find, we're looking at two 4D AGM batteries and a large catamaran. And these batteries, although he's got a strap, he's put a strap around them to try to keep them secure. They are not properly secured or mounted. These things still move real easy. They slide around them. So these batteries need to be secured. And I harp on this on a lot of videos because I see it a lot. Movement no greater than 1 inch in any directions per ABYC recommendations. Ideally no movement, but at a maximum 1 inch movement in any direction. So these batteries need to be better secured. Today's find, we have a bait well pump that is mounted directly to through hull and seacock. It's mounted directly onto the seacock. Here is a better view of the installation, side view of it. The problem with this installation is that you have a plastic or a composite pump mounted to a metal seacock. Both of these have different expansion and contraction ratios, so they shouldn't be mated together because the plastic could crack, as the metal expands or whatever. The other thing is this pump basically acts like a lever, and it's going to be flopping around as the boat's underway. A better option would be to have this pump replace it with a bulkhead mounted pump and plumb it to that rather than have it mounted directly to the seacock. And another issue, seacock is frozen, so it needs to be serviced as well.
So for today, it's the not everything is always bad episode. Here we're looking at a bilge pump installation. That looks good. And back here is the backup bilge pump, and the automatic float switch for this pump is also the sensor for the high water bilge alarm. One good thing about this installation is that the backup bilge pump is mounted 3 to 4 inches above the primary bilge pump. This ensures that the backup bilge pump is not resting in the normal accumulation of bilge water, which helps ensure that it will not become clogged or seized, and it will be ready to pump when it's activated and needed. So for today's find, we're looking at a anchor light, and the anchor light is also, it serves as the stern light or 360-degree white light for the running lights mounted on this power vessel. The problem is the owner has mounted a GoPro camera mount
dead in front of the anchor light, and it is of course blocking, you know, the visibility of the anchor light from or stern light, depending on what it's being used at, from the bow. So this of course will need to be reconfigured and moved so that the anchor light is fully visible 360 degrees at all times.
Here will be the view from the bow, and you can see that the GoPro pole mount is blocking the anchor light pretty effectively when you're looking at it from dead on. So for today's 60-second survey, we have a typical battery installation. Everything looks pretty good initially. The positive terminals of the battery are covered, but wait, this is also a positive terminal and it is not covered. So to comply with ABYC recommendations, it must also be covered with a boot or non-conductive protective shield to prevent accidental shorting. So for today's find, we're looking at something I see all the time. This is a screw pin shackle in an anchor rod, and the screw pin should be secured or moused with stainless steel wire to keep it from unscrewing. That's the purpose of the little hole there. This prevents the loss of the anchor, but you can do it incorrectly. Here the owner has installed a wire tie in the screw pin shackle, but he's not put it around the body of the shackle. So that does not prevent the screw pin from unscrewing, which again could result in the loss of the anchor. And worse, potentially the loss of the vessel itself.